All this is Dr. Mobeen Sayyed from drbeen.com. Welcome to one more show. So I had actually said bye and was going to go for the weekend. And Cool Bean said that, hey, we were actually hoping to have a talk. So here I am. Let's start with something really valuable right in the beginning. There are a couple of things that are important. One is brain damage because of COVID and possibility of early dementia or Alzheimer's. I want to discuss that and present the possible mechanism. This is a study that I want to share high level because I just looked at the study and I'm going to present it. I didn't prepare it the way I usually do. Second is the flu vaccine and the COVID vaccine or the SARS-CoV-2 vaccine. They have been combined and have been trialed, and the results are that they do not cause any issues, number one, and number two, the immune system develops the response correctly. So I thought I'll look into that news as well. With that, if possible, then we'll talk about the COVID, how it is going. Looks like the US has 44% drop in the cases, although CDC is continuing to move forward with authorization of vaccines and other things. I think this is time for us to start focusing on getting out of it, opening up the society, deciding where the hotspots are, making rules for those areas, helping people there instead of just. It looks like there is a lack of self-awareness that the pandemic is going in a different direction, and the responses seem to have been occurring as if they were uh, 1 year ago. Okay, so let's see. I'm going to start with the and Rima said Denmark. So yeah, we'll look into that as well. I had actually requested Paul to prepare these, and maybe Paul, if you are here, if not today, then tomorrow we can come on and we can talk about Scandinavia and others. Today, I'll just briefly talk about some of these things. So let's start from the Alzheimer's. Fascinating pathology and the fascinating uh, damage mechanism. And it will be interesting to look at that mechanism. So I'm going to present high level without any preparation. I'll present the mechanism for what Alzheimer, how does it cause the damage. So let's see. First of all, here is the in the router. This is the news. At Columbia University, Dr. Andrew Marks and colleagues studied the brain of 10 COVID-19 patients and found defects in proteins called ryanodine receptors, and I'll explain what these are, that control the passage of calcium into cells. In Alzheimer's disease, defective ryanodine receptors are linked to accumulation of tau into so-called neurofibrillary tangles. These tangles were present in high level in the COVID-19 patients' brains. The Columbia team reported on Thursday in Alzheimer and dementia. That is very interesting. How rapidly the tau tangles formed in COVID patients. That's scary. Other research teams have looked for and found abnormal amyloid levels in brains as well. So I'll explain that as well. Amyloids are also a um, pathology that is seen in Alzheimer's patients. So how did it was that already present, or did COVID or SARS-CoV-2 or the inflammation related to SARS-CoV-2 caused it? That is the interesting part. And if that is being caused by the inflammatory state, which it can be because of chronic inflammation and our glial cells abnormalities, I'll talk about that too, then dementia and Alzheimer can occur. So according to reports posted online ahead of peer review in bioRx, so this is the study and I'm going to talk about that. So before we go there, let me just very quickly uh, read this one out. So this is the flu shot with with the mRNA shot. So seniors can get flu shot, mRNA COVID booster together. Seniors can safely get the high dose flu vaccine and mRNA COVID booster dose at the same time, new study confirms. The study had 306 participants, all older than 65. were randomly assigned either to receive Sanofi's Fluzone high dose quadrivalent influenza vaccine and a third shot of Moderna's mRNA vaccine at the same time, or either of the vaccines alone. Blood samples obtained before and 21 days after the vaccination showed that giving the two vaccines together did not affect the resulting immune response, with similar antibody levels generated in participants in each of the three groups, according to a report published in Lancet Respiratory Medicine. So, that is an interesting study as well. So, with this, let's now look at Alzheimer's for a second and the what are we talking about with the neuro tau proteins and the beta amyloids. So, let's do our quick drawing. So imagine we sit down in a tiny helicopter and we go inside the brain. Inside the brain, we have billions of neurons. A neuron is structured this way: it has a cell body, just like other cells have a cell structure. It has a cell body where there is a nucleus, and in addition to the nucleus, there are mitochondria and there are other structures. There are endosomes and Golgi operators and vesicles and lysosomes and endoplasmic reticulum, smooth and rough, and so on, the cellular structures. Then the neuron has a long thread going from it. That long thread is called axon. An axon is usually covered by myelin sheath, which is a fatty layer of cells made up of cells that are rich in fats. They are little fat cells. We shouldn't call them fat cells. People are going to come and fry me for saying myelin sheath is not a fat cells, but they're rich in fat. They have a lot of fat in them. So this myelin sheath covers the axons, and then the end of the axon is um, naked, and it is usually dilated, and this is the end part or terminal part. This last part of the neuron can then synapse. Synapse means it can connect with another neuron's branch. So before I draw that, if I come back here to this neuron that we are making, let's call it neuron A. This neuron should have some way to receive communication. And then, of course, we have seen the way to send messages. Normally, a neuron can send messages outwards, usually by one long big thread, and that is the axon. They usually receive, for example, sensory nerve coming from your hand all the way to the brain is one long thread as well. So they can send or receive through these long thread like nerves. But they also have a ton of small threads on them, which are called dendrites. Dendrites are nothing but, you can call them receivers. They are also um, branches coming out, and they're going to receive the signals. So now if you keep these dendrites in your mind, then this axon is going to be connecting with the dendrite of another neuron. So this is, let's say, another neuron, and this neuron has a bunch of dendrites on it, right? So let's give them little eyes so they are kind of happy neurons. And then here is the axon from here as well. And so this is how neurons actually talk with each other. And this part where one neuron finishes and the other neuron's dendrite, and this neuron's A's axon and the other's dendrite, they come together. They never actually touch. They have a gap between them, but they come together. They make a synapse. Synapse is a connection. This is usually not a physical or mechanical connection. Instead, there is a gap between them. This gap is called synaptic cleft. And in here, this neuron, the first one that is sending messages through axon, will release chemical substances. These are the chemical substances that we talk about: adrenaline and noradrenaline and acetylcholine and dopamine and so on, serotonin. So one neuron releases those chemical substances. Other neuron has receptors for them. And as those substances connect with the receptors on the other neuron, there is electrical activity that is started. So what happens is electrical activity is coming in the wire in one neuron. Then here in the synapse, it is converted into chemical activity. Then it becomes converted back to electrical activity, and then it continues to travel. Eventually, there are some neurons. So we are now doing nervous system discussion. There are some neurons that, for example, look at this neuron, this one, let's call it B neuron. There are some neurons that sit between the two neurons. So let's say there is then another neuron with its own dendrites, and then it has its own little axon as well, right? And that axon has its own myelin on it. Here is an myelin as well. This neuron B, this one, is usually called an interneuron. Why? Because it is sitting between the two neurons. And let's say this is a C neuron. Eventually, the question should be in our mind that what is it? Where is the end of it? This all, is this just they are connecting? Yes, in the brain, a lot of them are just connecting. But then some neurons are going to end up on, let's say, a muscle. So let's say this is a muscle, and this neuron sends branches on the muscle, and when that electrical activity arrives in this on this muscle, then the muscle would contract. And now you could say that, how would it relax? Is there electrical activity there as well? So normally what happens is that neurons send a pulse continuous set of pulses to the muscle. So let's say there are 1,000 pulses coming every second. I'm just making up some number. And that gives a specific tone to the muscle. If you reduce those 1,000 impulses from 1,000 to, let's say, 500 in a second, now the tone will be less and the muscle would look like it is relaxing. So really, reducing the number of impulses to the muscle means relaxation. And increasing the number of impulses would create tone and contraction. But the point is not really to talk about neuromuscular junctions and how this works. The point is, eventually neurons will relay on a muscle or a gland or another neuron and so on. This is how these guys work. If this structure, so in the last talk with Dr. Mark Levitt, Rima had said, what is a ganglion? If this structure, so this is a structure that is present in the brain, and we call it gray matter. Why do we call it gray matter? Because many of these cell bodies, these guys, the cells, and those little tiny dendrites, and most of the interneurons within the brain generally do not have myelin sheaths on them. When you look at the cell bodies under the microscope, they look gray. But when you look at those sections of the brain and outside that have myelin sheath on them, they look white. The gray matter is then called a collection of cell bodies. When gray matter exists outside of the brain, then that is called a ganglion. It is really a tiny piece of brain living outside of the brain. So it is doing a very tiny function like a brain, very tiny function. So it's not really a brain, it's just a tiny piece which is doing some relay center activities. As Dr. Levitt said, it's a cell tower where some activities, messages are coming in and messages are going out, and then some rudimentary processing is occurring as well. So this is what is happening normally. Now the question is, what happens in Alzheimer's? And then the question is, why does COVID start to look like it is going to cause Alzheimer? So let's look at that. First of all, to understand Alzheimer's most common pathology, and I'm going to go to high level to describe it. There are so many um, research papers and new possibilities that what I'm going to say is more standardized, traditional explanation. There are newer ways, and I think we'll take that up as part of dementia series next. So let's go with the standard explanations. First thing to know, and this fascinates me to no end, and that is this: inside our cells, when the cells are functioning, we have, so let's say this is a neuron cell, we have zoomed in a little more, and these guys this looks like a big turnip. So these guys are the dendrites. They would be there to receive the messages, and this is going to be the axon. This is where the messages will go out, right? This is a really bad axon. Let me fix it. Okay, so I became a little embarrassed about this axon. So inside this cell's body, there are activities happening. There are some chemical substances that are moving from here to here. There are messages going from here to here. There are a bunch of things that are happening inside the cell. And I have said it many times before, our cell are weird in this way that when they need to transport something from point A within the cell, we're talking about this little microscopic thing within that cell. When we have to send something from point A to point B, that thing doesn't just swim to the from A to B. We actually have to make a road between these 2 points. Then we have to attach a car or a vehicle on that road. Then we have to attach that thing that is going to be traveling from point A to B. We attach that onto that car, then allow that car to go and travel on that road to reach the point B. Once it reaches there, then we destroy this road and rebuild it to for something else to travel within the cell. Can you imagine this? I mean, just this mechanism, we can we can kiss these cells for being so fascinating. So here, uh, let's say this is the point A and this is the point B. Between the A to B is a microtubule. This is a micro microtubule. They are actually not, they're thread-like structures, but rather tube-like structures. And they are built between the 2 points. On the microtubule, so if I now zoom into this part and show you microtubules, why? Because it is important to understand them for Alzheimer. Let's say here are a number of, every red line is a microtubule. Normally, microtubules create a circle-like structure, a tube-like structure, whose walls are made up of many, many microtubules. What a beauty. On this, on this microtubule, to keep it stable, remember we just made this road. They were just builders who came in and they made it. Now we need to keep it stable as well. And to keep it stable, we attach on the outer side of these microtubules, we attach proteins that are called tau tau proteins. Tau proteins. Their job, these proteins' job, is to kind of stabilize the microtubules and make this structure, or let this structure be stable. Good. And why do we need the microtubule? Because we want to send something from A to B. Now, who would use this microtubule? There are things called dyneins or kinosins. These are little proteins, cars that look like something like this, and they have feet. They actually have feet, and they walk onto this thing with their feet, and they go 1 foot forward and then other foot forward and then next foot forward and the next, and they walk on it. And as they walk on it, they're carrying some load that goes with them. Once they've reached the other point, then these tau proteins are separated, microtubules are dismantled, and the road is gone. Good. Now, first pathology for Alzheimer's. Imagine for some reason these tau proteins fall off of the microtubule, fall off of it. Now we have two problems. One problem is that when the tau proteins have fallen off, then they're sitting somewhere making trash. They're making garbage. They're making a tangle. They're making just jumbled up tau proteins sitting in the cell. That's one problem. This is like if a um, those scaffolding outside of the being built buildings. Imagine the scaffolding falls, and now that has its own that's debris and broken wooden pieces or metallic pieces, and they're all accumulated. I'm talking in terms of cells. They're all uh, you know piled up on the roadside. So that is of course a problem. And second problem is that the building that was supported by these tau proteins, in this case this microtubule, will fall apart because the supporting structure is gone. So now we have two things that have fallen apart. The road itself has fallen apart, this thing, and then the scaffolding on the road, the stabilizing proteins have fallen apart as well. So we have a bunch of trash that has accumulated in the cell. Now there is on top of it, there is another problem. The problem is this road was not just sitting there in vain. This is not a deserted road that, well, we made this road, nobody uses it, so be it. We were going to use this to send something from A to B. Now that thing that has to go from A to B has to do some function. And now that thing cannot go from A to B. So cellular function is impacted. Now it is possible that in the early part of dementia and Alzheimer's, this one set of tubules is fallen apart, but another is built, and the thing can go from A to B still. So there is some problems, but not huge. The issue now is when these piles of broken tau proteins or separated tau proteins, when they pile up, they start binding to each other, and that is what is a tangle. When the tangle is present in the cell, that cell's own functionality will become disrupted, eventually to a point that this poor cell cannot send nutrients down its axons and dendrites. Imagine if the cell was a country, it has to send all the materials, the food, nutrients to the whole part of it to keep them all alive. It cannot send them anymore because the transportation system has become impacted. Not only that, but there are piles of garbage everywhere. So even if it wants to make a microtubule, it cannot. So what will happen to the cell is eventually, because the infrastructure has collapsed, the cell itself would have a problem, and that is that it will start shrinking. The things which will not get nutrition, those things would start shriveling away. So the cell would start becoming smaller and smaller. The axon would start becoming destroyed, and dendrites would be destroyed. And finally, there'll be nothing but really a little scar of a cell that is there and sitting there and crying, right? These, when present a lot, when a lot of brain damage occurs, these clusters of shriveled broken cells, not functional cells, are called neurofibrillary tangles. So the tangles are inside, and then the whole cluster starts looking like tangles. So the brain tissue cannot afford for the cells to die and go away. We have billions of cells, we can compensate for them if some of them died. But if they just in mass continue to die, we'll have a problem. And that problem is going to become evident in the person's functions of the brain. Memory starts going away. The executive functions, that is, personality decisions, start becoming impacted. Then the behavioral aspects, the limbic system starts becoming impacted. The brain starts shrinking because the cells inside are shriveling and dying and tangling. So that is one. This is the neurofibrillary tangles and tau protein. In this study, they found that the patients of COVID had a higher amount of tau protein in them. That means the Alzheimer's was kind of kicked off or accelerated. Maybe they already had some start of the Alzheimer's. Maybe we all start developing these things as we age. But COVID and the inflammation related to it had accelerated that process. So, again, I have not gone thoroughly in the mechanism that they proposed. From the topic I was discussing with you, they are saying that the mechanism possibly is, and hold on to this thought, that I have to yet explain the plaques or beta amyloid plaques. I'll talk about them in a second. First, let me add one more concept here. Normally, when there is a problem in the brain, when there is an infection in the brain, when there is a inflammation in the brain, when there is this kind of damage in the brain, what happens is we have special cells in the brain which are called glial microglial cells. You can say that they are the kind of the defense system in the brain. We do not allow the cells from outside, for example monocytes and macrophages from outside, to go into the cell and brain and come out of the brain. That's not allowed. Brain does not allow that. So what happens is brain has its own immune system, and one important part of that defense system or protection system are microglial cells. Their job is to work with the cells that have become inflamed and that are under stress, and they would either repair them, help them, or remove these stressful things, or these cells would die and so on. These microglial cells can actually stabilize the microenvironment in various tissues of the brain as well. So they do a lot of helpful things to keep our brain cells sharp and healthy. The problem is that in these situations, the microglial cells themselves are not functioning correctly. So the basic problem that we see that there are neurofibrillary tangles that are forming. Okay, the question is, what are microglial cells doing? They're supposed to help with this. What's going on with them? So possibly there is some problem with these microglial cells as well, because of the inflammatory cytokines that are going on in the body and entering the brain as well. And the result of that is that the brain tissue is not able to repair itself correctly or support itself correctly, and the tau proteins and tangles are formed. So that is one. Second is the beta amyloid plaques. It's a totally different mechanism. The outcome of that mechanism also is a problem, a disruption of the brain function. So let's see that. The current function that you saw was occurring inside this cell, the neuron. And I was going to say, we have billions of neurons. We can afford some of them to die, but we cannot replace them easily. There is some regeneration or new cell formation. They're doing some discussions of using stem cells to produce new cells, but generally a brain cell gone is gone. And brain cells have learned to live for 100 years or more. Just one cell can live for 100 years. Other body tissue cells are replaced. Our skin cells are replaced all the time. Our GIT cells are replaced all the time. Brain cell all the time, within 10-15 days. Brain cells have learned to live for 100 years or more. So when we lose them, we don't have a way to replace them. And even if we can generate new brain cells in the brain, how are we going to give them the same connections? This is like this, that if in my house we pull the electrical wire away from some wall, and then some repairman comes in and says, I brought you a new wire, I'm going to put that here and that should work. And I would say, well, that wire needs to now be connected in this network. And imagine he says, I have no idea how to connect it. I do not know this where to connect this wire. I'll just leave the wire here. That would not work. And interestingly, this in itself is a beautiful study to see how the cells in a baby, forming baby embryo, how the cells reach various destination of our body and then they become specific cells. It seems like when we are embryos, our cells have a GPS mechanism in them that helps them travel to various body parts and then become various things. So maybe as we put the stem cells in our brain, they might be helped by the same GPS system and become connected. The problem is, can they do that in adults? So, totally different, fascinating study. And you can tell how passionate I am about the neurology. I love neurology. I actually love all medical sciences. Okay, so back here, the second concept is the beta amyloids. The current concept we saw was a problem inside the neuron. Now we're going to see something that is a problem outside of the neuron. And what does that mean? Remember this part here? We said that we have the neurons connecting with each other and giving messages to each other, and they have these little dendroids, and on the dendroids will be the axons that will come and attach there, and many neurons would talk like that with each other, right? So imagine these are all neurons. Now imagine between this beautiful sophisticated system, not between, but here inside the structure, we start putting lots of trash here. We start throwing trash everywhere. And that trash starts accumulating. It is outside of the neurons, but it is still within the brain tissue space. So when we throw that trash, it disrupts the neuronal connectivities. It presses on the neurons. It is now damaging the tissue's infrastructure. The architecture of the tissue is being damaged, and that would cause nearby neuronal damage as well. So in the tangles, we had the trash piling up inside the neuron. Here we have the trash piling up outside the neuron. Now, how does this trash get piled up? Very interesting mechanism. And again, these are traditional mechanisms. There's lots of new studies that are showing new things. So what happens is, now let's go again to the neuron cell body. In a neuronal cell body, let's make it black. So let's say, excuse me. So let's say this is a neuronal cell body with the, I keep making turnips. So this is the axon. These are dendrites. This is a neuron, right? Make it a happy face. Now, this is myelin sheath on it. Now what happens is, in the cell membrane of the neuron, so imagine you took a helicopter and you landed on the cell membrane here. Inside the cell membrane, there is a protein called APP. It's a precursor protein for amyloids. It is usually connected to the cell membrane. We don't want it to be there. We want it to become cleaved off, sliced off, removed. So inside the cell, there are a few enzymes whose job is to snip this thing a couple of times, to bite it a couple of times, to cut it a couple of times. Imagine these enzymes inside the cell are like gardeners with their scissors, and they come in and they trim this thing a couple of times. The result is this protein, the precursor protein, gets broken away from the cell membrane in a couple of pieces. These are the beta amyloid pieces. These pieces are then removed and they're gone, and it is good to remove them and so on. They are good to be removed. That's a healthy process. The problem occurs that the first snipping enzyme, which is called beta secretase enzyme from inside, imagine that's a gardener. There are two gardeners who that would come in and cut this tree. The first one is going to come in and cut that here, then the second one would come in and cut that here. So the first gardener's name is beta secretase, the other one is gamma secretase. But in some cases, instead of beta secretase, alpha secretase comes in and cuts it at the wrong place. So imagine there are two gardeners whose job is to cut a tree, and one has to cut it in the middle and the other one has to cut it at the root. But the first gardener comes in and he doesn't come in, he sends an alternative gardener and says, "Hey, I'm sick, I have COVID, can you please go and do this tree cutting thing for me?" And the other gardener, called alpha secretase, comes in and cuts the tree at the wrong place, instead of the middle, little lower than the middle. So that means that two pieces that would be now created will be different structure. That different structure, our body do not know how to handle it. If it was cut in the correct places, our body knows how to remove it. Maybe it has little trucks that can pick that up and go. But if it is cut in wrong places, then our body doesn't know what to do, and those incorrectly cut pieces start accumulating together, binding together, and making plaques outside of the neurons, between the neurons. And that is a horrible thing, because now there are things accumulating, trash accumulating between the neurons. We cannot just pick it up and remove it. And it is going to slowly start damaging the neurons. It's going to press on them. It's going to cause local inflammation. It's going to pierce various neurons and it would irritate them. And these are plaques or the functions of the neurons. Imagine if it was a road, that is, one neuron is connecting to another and there is a plaque and the connection is broken because of the pressure from the plaque. The function of the brain is going to go down. So that is the possibility of how dementia and Alzheimer's starts developing. And as this keeps going on, then the pathology increases. The study, if I go back to that, they said that they saw both things in here. They saw tangles were present in high levels in COVID-19 patient brains. Then they said, look at this, and found abnormal amyloid levels in the brain as well. So there are some studies that are finding abnormal amyloids. Amyloids are the outside trash, and the tangles are inside trash. That means, so possibilities are the following. Either these patients already had this, and we just found that tissue when they died, and we are associating it to SARS-CoV-2. That is one possibility. Second possibility is it is caused by SARS-CoV-2. Third possibility is SARS-CoV-2 caused inflammation, and that inflammation or something because of inflammation caused microglia to become dysregulated, which then in turn did not repair the brain tissue damages, and that caused the issue. So this is the end result. Now they're suspecting that patients who are coming up and saying, hey, we have brain fog, or we have neurological, we cannot see correctly, or we have other issues, maybe there is a problem like this happening. So I went on by myself for last 40 minutes. So tell me if you were following or you were just doing your own little discussions. Uh, Doug says just fell off the turnip truck. Eh? So I hope not. Okay, so Keeney says, I love your passion for neurology. Thank you very much. Um, Denise says, IVM has shown in studies to protect for MS against demyelination. Yeah, there are many things that help with that. Ketamine, Doug says ketamine regrow connections. So there are many drugs that can help reduce the this damage plus help regrow and regenerate. So okay, so now this is one part of the discussion. The second part of the discussion, the vaccine, we talked about it. The third part, I wanted to look at the case rates in the in various countries. And of course, we can start with Denmark. I have actually requested Denmark's head of epidemiology to join us. Let's see if she says yes or not. Janet said, I found it totally fascinating. Thank you. Carrie Lynn says, I was following. Thank you very much. Uh, Titeen says, hello from Dubai. Hello back to you. John Doe says, average age of C19 patient is up there. Hope this is correlation and not causation. Exactly. So it will actually be interesting to go and see this study and see their patient ages. So I'll have to look into that study. This is a 10 patient study with the oh, so I did not explain one more area, and that is the ryanodine receptors. So very quickly, can I explain it? I love these receptors as well. So let's very quickly talk about ryanodine. I promise I won't take too much time. So what happens is, let's see if I can do a quick job. If inside a cell, so let's say this is a neuron and this is the axon and these are dendroids, right? Just for the completion's sake, this is the neuron. And let's say this neuron is kind of lying down here saying hello to you. That is really important that it says you hello. Okay. Now, role of calcium. What happens is that inside this cell, the nerve conduction, the signal that is moving, it needs calcium and sodium and potassium. In some cells, inside the cell, there is a structure. So if I make a cell now, imagine we've gone in more. This is especially for the muscles. Muscles have these T tubules. And then neurons need calcium as well. That is why when there is calcium abnormality, there is a problem with the muscle function, there is a problem with the nervous system function. So the person can say, I'm feeling weak and fatigued, plus they can say, I'm not able to concentrate or think correctly, plus they may have bone related issues too. The reason is calcium is not just important for the bone, it is also important for the function of a muscle and bone. Why? Because calcium is very important for the electrical conduction of the system in the system. So if the electrical conduction is disrupted, then muscles and nerves are not going to work correctly. So here, let's say this is a muscle. Inside the muscle is something, a structure that is filled with calcium. This has like muscle has its own little bag of calcium. Why? Because calcium is very, very important for muscle contraction. So again, this is not nerve, but I'm giving you an idea of how ryanodine receptors will work, and then we'll go back to the nerve for a second. So this muscle has a bag of calcium. This bag that contains the calcium is called um, sarcoplasmic sarcoplasmic reticulum or SR. This little bag has receptors on it which are called ryanodine receptors, ryanodine or ryanodine. receptors. These receptors are activated by calcium and they allow the calcium to come out. So, what happens is when the electrical impulse arrives in this area, calcium would eventually enter the cell from outside. When the calcium would enter the cell, then that calcium would go and act on the ryanodine receptors, which in turn would cause calcium to come out of this bag. And tiny amount of calcium from outside would cause a big, flow of calcium inside. So where did that calcium come from? That came from within the sarcoplasmic reticulum, and now the calcium would help create the electrical potential, and that is how the electrical work would happen. Similar things happen here as well. So what they saw was, this is fascinating, what they saw was in COVID, the ryanodine receptors were not working correctly. And the result of that was that when they were not working correctly, then the function was not occurring correctly. Number one. Number two, when these receptors were not working correctly, then within the cell, tau protein, the tau tangles started appearing. So, an abnormality of the ryanodine receptor ended up causing disruption of the cellular function, and the cellular function fell apart, and the tau protein started accumulating. Once they start accumulating, we have a problem. This neuron is not going to be happy anymore. So, the researchers found that the ryanodine receptors are being damaged. Now, why are they being damaged? Is that the inflammation? Is that the abnormality of the glial cell? Is that something else? That is not known yet. Plus, I haven't read the study if they're proposing anything. So, this is the second part of this discussion. So, now you are up with dementia, Alzheimer, high level, and how COVID studies are showing that there may be similar mechanism triggered. Now, is that because I was already there or started happening afterwards? We'll see. I'll do some more research on this one. Okay, so now, um, Abbas says, do the ryanodine receptors become leaky and thus cause pathology in COVID-19? Don't know. So they simply say that it is possible that the ryanodine receptors become abnormal, which then cause abnormal function of tau protein, which then cause the accumulation of trash. Now, exactly what is the mechanism that they did, I have to look at their actual study as well. Anna says, for what it's worth, I have scar tissue in my brain. Neurologist says, probably from COVID, not very sick. Exposure via food, excruciatingly painful mouth followed by horrific migraine and depression. I'm very sorry to hear that. I hope you recover fully, Anna, and completely and fast. This virus has caused so much damage in so many ways. Um, DDS says Dr. Bean Discord has a helpful section for long haulers. Dana says, could this cause constant vertigo when nothing has been found in the inner ear, possible long COVID? So, vertigo. Let's quickly talk about that as well, because some of the patients feel that. So, let's say here is a person. My, my apologies if you think this is you. I'm going to try to draw any one of us really, really nicely over here. So, this is a person. Nice, cute person. Okay, so for a person and their sense of balance, there are three things that are needed. Number one, their, I have to make ears, their internal ear have to work correctly. Why? Because inside in the internal ear, there is a part that is for hearing, and then these are the semicircular canals that are responsible for the balance. Right? So these three canals that are at right angle to each other. So they're kind of in this three dimension, and they are filled with fluids. And so whichever direction we are moving, these the fluid in these canals move with varying speed, and there are hair cells within the canals. And when the fluid moves in them, our brain can calculate how we are moving and can figure out what is our position and work with that. Now, that is one sense. That is one part of us feeling normal and oriented. The second part is our eyes. There are no eyes in this one, so let's give it eyes. So, eyes. This person now looks stunned. So, my apologies. Okay, let me make this person a little like this. Okay, so eyes. Eyes is the second part. So, we can look around and feel oriented in our environment. Third part is the muscle and tendon sensors. So imagine if, let's say, my hand here, this tendon here, when I move my hand, I can actually feel the tension in my tendon. I can feel the tension. I'm doing this little muscle thingy, and I can feel the tone in my muscle too. Now, if I have that tone in my tendon and in my muscle, I'm sure that the opposite side has a different tone and in the tendon and muscles. Similarly, all muscle groups that are associated with this posture would have their own tones. Those tones are sent to the brain as well. Brain uses that. So let me say Golgi. These are called Golgi tendon organs and muscle spindles, but mostly Golgi tendon organs. So now we have three sensors. Muscles tell what is the body's position. Your muscles right now and your tendon and the tones is telling your brain what is your position. Whatever your position is, it is relayed to brain. Your eyes and your ears, they all together make up, form your orientation in the environment. Now, as your orientation changes, as you walk about, or you travel, or you run, or you sit, various changes are sent through these sensors, and brain continues to um, orient itself. Now, brain is very smart. What it does is it's always worried that somebody is going to poison us, somebody is going to kill us, a lion is going to come in, and a person is going to give us poison. Something is going to happen. So, what it does is it wants all the three senses to be in sync with each other. For example, if the eyes say we are moving, then the muscles should say we are moving as well. Ears should say we are moving as well. And this is why some people get, travel sickness or sea-sickness, because their body doesn't say they're moving, they're just sitting in the ship, let's say, but their ears and their eyes are showing movement, and their ears are producing movement as well, sensation, but the body is not changing. In such system where one sense says differently and the other sense does not synchronize with it, brain produces the feeling of vertigo. Vertigo itself is nothing. Brain, it is a reaction of, there are many reasons for vertigos, but this is in the case of orientation. Brain thinks that, well, this person's eyes, for imagine you're sitting inside a ship and you are just not looking at outside, so your eyes are not registering movement, and you're sitting, so your muscles are not registering movement, but your inner ears are, as the boat moves, inner ears are saying, well, we are moving. And the brain says, well, one sense is not correctly working, the rest are working differently. It looks like somebody has poisoned us. So what does brain do? Brain says, you know what? Number one, it doesn't know how to orient yourself anymore. So you start getting the feeling of vertigo. Plus, brain would start creating nausea to think because it thinks that there is poison in the stomach. So it is trying to push the poison out. It's trying to cause vomiting to remove that poison. This is why people who become seasick, they start getting disoriented plus nauseated. Now, in case of the um, COVID and vertigo, most possible outcome is the inner ears, the messages from the inner ear to be not fully or correctly seen. Now, what happens in there is that I'm hearing from a lot of friends as well that the ENT says everything is fine. The problem is there is microvascular issue that COVID causes microthrombi, or so microthrombi would cause local compromise in the blood supply. Or, as we discussed a few days ago with Dr. Bruce Patterson and Yo, that it is also possible that the blood vessels are extra dilated. And as they are extra dilated, they are going to cause congestion in this area. Not sufficient congestion to see, but enough congestion to kind of disrupt the function of these structures, inner ear structures. That is what would create the feeling of vertigo. So, the problem to solve here is this: is it happening A, because of the microthrombi and a constricted blood vessel or clogged blood vessel? Or is it happening with the opposite of that, and that is dilated blood vessel with congestion in the area and more fluid than normal? So, is it because of less or more that is a problem? And so, this is why, and the third for vertigo and for inner ear issues, the third is, especially with tinnitus as well, there are many drugs that do it, even the ones that we are taking during COVID. So, is it A or B or C? That is not known. So, the doctor will have to be really careful. What I'm seeing is that they're simply dismissing it, saying everything is fine, go home, right? Doctor will have to actually, if they are really going to do doctoring, what they should be doing is, number one, say what are the medicines that may be causing this. Number two, is it possible that there are microthrombi? Number three, is it possible that there is extra inflammation? So, how can they solve this? Give anti inflammatory, give aspirin like things for microthrombi, plus reduce or eliminate any drugs that might be contributing to this. This is how they will have to look at it. So, Dana, so sorry that I took so long to explain it, but I think this is an important one and there is so less data about it. Joel says, have you looked on COVID and fat cells? Not yet. Sorry. Okay, so let's see. Abir, thank you very much. The world has moved on while I was talking another 20 minutes for this or 10 minutes. Um, Michael says, regarding Alzheimer's, would severity of the COVID determine extent of neurodamage? Yes, at least they said these were severe patients. And could vaccine have similar effect? I would suggest yes. It may not be as prolonged or as severe because vaccine would be for a smaller period of time compared to the COVID, but there are people with the lingering side effects of vaccine where it is not for small period of time, it just continues. In such folks, neurological outcomes are there. My family members had it. Now they didn't, brain fog was there, but of course without looking at the brain tissue you cannot say that dementia or Alzheimer's was there, but brain fog and confusion and problem with the recall was there. So 93-year-old dad had sudden cognitive decline few weeks post booster. Both are possible. with the COVID and with this. Now, the thing is this, as you can see, there is a much more um, suppression is the right word to use. There is much more suppression to accept that vaccine related outcomes could be such as well. Because of that, I feel that the data is less easily surfaced, but COVID related such things are surfaced more quickly because that helps folks make a case to say go take a vaccine. In my opinion, both things can do this. And a mechanism, I was talking with on FLCCC, and I was demonstrating the mechanism. It could be anti-ACE2 antibodies, and if that is the case, then doesn't matter vaccine or the COVID, they could cause these kind of effects. I wish that there was freedom for doctors to talk about these things. I wish there was freedom, and not only freedom, leadership in folks like CDCs and FDAs to bring them together instead of hushing them away and trying to suppress them and trying to cancel their licenses and trying to call them names. If they had brought them in, let's say a monthly meeting, imagine this, you are running CDC, you call all such folks, how many are there? 10, 20, 30. You bring them in, have them sit down, talk about it, and say, here is the latest data. Or say, well, you saw this, we're going to go and do some research on this one. And then create that leadership forums. I think they would have so much success compared to where they are at and where we as a nation are at. We are suffering. Okay, so let's see. Greenery says, can microclots in brain be measured? Yes, so if microclots are occurring in the brain, then they would be occurring outside as well. And so D dimers can be done, and the C reactive protein and other inflammatory markers can be done. D dimer is going to be important, then bleeding time and those. So, yes, there are markers that can be used to see what is the clotting situation. Radmila says, hi to everyone. Hi back to you as well. So Vinod says if vax can connect to long COVID, so I would, although when we were talking with Dr. Bruce Peterson, he kind of called it long COVID. In my opinion, long COVID means long disease of COVID. Vaccine doesn't cause COVID, so it is not long COVID. It is post vaccine injury, which has symptoms very similar to long COVID as well, because the basic pathology and the causative agents can be very similar. So then, with that clarification, if vaccination can connect to long COVID, can severe cases even manifest abnormalities in HRCT, making it indistinguishable from a COVID infection? So, vaccine has not yet been shown to cause respiratory tissue damage. And the reason is actually very simple. You give vaccine in a small quantity over here, and that's it. Then it is picked up by the cells and destroyed, and maybe some tiny part is moving around as well. Virus, and luckily not for Omicron now, and not for Omicron in majority. In some people, Omicron is still causing more damage, but before Omicron, the virus would go down deeper into the lung tissue and keep replicating, keep increasing, and keep causing cytokine storms. That continuous increase, imagine vaccine dose on every minute doubling and doubling and doubling. That storm of infection and response causes the lung damage. Vaccine doesn't have enough quantity to be able to do it. I know that this is going to have some folks become upset, but um, this idea. So, a few days ago, when somebody wrote a misunderstanding, a friend of mine wrote a hit job about me, and I saw the comments below. People actually kept talking about this, that the vaccine causes these things. Vaccine causes its own injury and it has its own mechanism, and that is real as well. Kevin says, how is Luffy? So Luffy is very good. Did you not watch his latest video? So let me show you his video. So today, I think you'll feel so proud of me for doing this. Today, what I did was, during the day, I I want to show it to you. So 1 second. I'm just opening up YouTube. Yeah, look, Luffy and Kairi. So I made this today. So this is Luffy. He was trying to sleep. So Luffy has his chair and his comforter on the chairs in all rooms. So one is here, one is in my bedroom. So this is his chair, and he was preparing to sleep. And I made his video. So why you would feel proud is that I have this camera that I had bought a couple of years ago, 1 year ago, I think. This is Sony Alpha 7C. I've not really used it much, and this has this Sony Grandmaster series lens. I was really excited to create vlogs, and then I just didn't have enough viewership to do anything. So I didn't do much with it. So today I picked it up and I made this video of Luffy, and I made it in those who are tech with the cameras. I made it in S-Log 2, and then I color graded it by lookup tables from Sony, and this is the result. Check it out. I'm going to remove the comment for a second, Kevin. So he just turned away from me. So that was the video that I posted on um, Luffy Kairi channel. And I posted this little short in the morning as well. That is Kairi. Kairi has claws, and if you put your hand next to her claws, she would grab your hand with her claws. So I had put that up as well. Okay, so thank you very much for asking. Rima says, is there data on 40-year-old male getting major aortic valve damage post booster enough that he needs full replacement with mechanical valve? I haven't seen that data, but that could be a gap in my knowledge instead of me saying no. Um, can the inflammation occur post vaccine or post COVID? Yes. Inflammation of heart? Yes. Now, can that inflammation cause um, problem with the areas of valves as well? At least in the rheumatic disease, we know that that can happen. I haven't seen that with COVID, but maybe. But at least this is known that there can be inflammation. That's what we know. Carolyn says, Luffy's like, dude, I'm trying to sleep. Yes, absolutely. And that is a problem. He sleeps during the day and then he wakes me up at night. So if Luffy can wake me up at night, I should be able to wake him up during the day. So that was the deal. Although he was not letting me. Radmila, that is correct. His eyes were like, yep, go away now. Maggie says, he's very handsome, yes. And Kevin says, so precious. Yeah, he's a brat because he knows he's cool. So Radmila says, apologize if already answered, but is there any data on Omicron and long COVID? Not yet. Not yet, but that's something that is really important to understand. I think it causes long COVID as well. Bambi. How are you doing, Bambi? And how is UK doing? I was going to look at UK, and so Boris Johnson has created a bunch of discussion after first hiding that he was meeting and then lying about it and then uh, doing it, meeting people 16 times while he was asking others not to. Kini says, which doctor to trust? On Medicare, it's now hard to be taken seriously. I'm interested in trying LDN. I have to work. Um, so, interesting. What I'm seeing is Dr. Bruce Patterson's group is more inclined towards Muravirok. I think it would be fair to say that they also have a patent on it, Muravirok for long COVID, so they have an interest in there. The I recover on FLCCC, we just updated it with LDN in that as well. However, many doctors are not yet fully aware or willing. So it seems to me that LDN is an important um, part of the solution, but is kind of becoming an orphaned drug. Yes. So, Kini, if you are having a lot of symptoms, and please reach out to IncelDX. They are they have a cell marker. They can give you a list of doctors who might work with their markers, and then have a doctors would decide how to manage. But there is a that's a for profit organization. I do not have any interest with them of any sort other than requesting them to come on and work with my show and discuss things with the cool beans, but they can be a good resource. Excuse me. Bambi says 5 staff from 10 Downing Street have resigned in 24 hours. Really? But did the head of the staff resign or not? Case data is unreliable. ONS positivity rate seems to track Zoe study data. Interesting. So it is actually interesting for me to see because Bambi isn't UK saying that, hey, we are opening up, and also let's see Denmark. So Denmark, here are the cases. Denmark has opened up, correct? Since this first. Of course, the number of deaths at this time are not a representation of opening up because it's only 2 days or 3 days, 4 days. So we'll see how that happens. How is UK doing? So UK continues to go down, which is excellent. And wow, look at the death counts. They are going down as well. I would suspect a similar thing for US, that we are recovering. Look at that. Isn't that beautiful? So we have, for example, and Paul would do a good job, Paul Borg. Um, so we were on January 14, so about 16, 17, 18 days ago, 800,000 or about a million cases per day. and now we are at 354. So, what, 60% reduction? Awesome. Death rate is still higher, but there is a last little downward turn. I do not know if it is reporting or it is actually downward. So we'll see. But generally, death rate is still lower. Bambi says Boris Johnson has sadly not resigned. He's hanging on. Uh, I would expect that from him. All mask mandates dropped. Parliament on Monday rammed. Conservatives no masks and Liz Truss tested positive at night. Other parties masks on. Interesting. So I think that so something that would probably become controversial, but I think we are reaching a point of dropping the mandates, and mandates should not have been there before, but meaning opening up the society and just starting to become normalized. Truth Seeker says, please press a like button. Absolutely, yes. Especially for me, going on with dementia and those things for 1 hour. I used to, so in my class, it is so funny that in our examination system, when we would have our exam, there would be one question optional. So we used to have subjective exams. For example, they'll say write about Parkinson's, and so you write about it. You say this is the disease definition, and this is the pathology, and this is the clinical side of blah. um, and there used to be one question optional. And most of the time, our class fellows used to leave, and not all, but some would leave nervous system to say, you know what, I'm just gonna not prepare it. And if there is used to be at least one question from the nervous systems, they'll just leave it. I used to always top nervous system exams. I used to love it so much. I actually love every single medicine mechanism. So Denise says Denmark is wide open. So yes, so from first they just opened, and I believe whole Scandinavia. I do not know if Sweden has opened up or not. Did Sweden? So Politico says 2 days ago. Actually, New York Times says Sweden announces an end to COVID restrictions, joins other European countries. Whoa! So that means the whole Scandinavian countries are now open. Let me just very quickly. So this is the Prime Minister of Sweden. I should send this to Jan, my friend. What? Sweden coronavirus cases, etc. So Sweden is open now. Denmark is open. How about Finland? I think the whole Scandinavia is open now. So they're done. I love it. We should also change our mindset towards getting done instead of adding more. It seems not unnecessary to me at this time to say, let's do this, more restriction, let's do that. I think we're getting to the end of it. That is correct. So John says, and Sweden never went into a lockdown, but still they had restrictions that they just opened, lifted. I remember that there was a lot of controversy in the beginning as well when they said not going to do it. The Swedish government will lift most COVID restrictions next week. The move adds Sweden to the growing list of European nations, including Denmark, Norway, that are scrapping pandemic protocols. So, what are the no restriction mean? No limit on how many people can gather at restaurants, sports stadiums, and other events, according to Lena Hellengren. the Minister of Health and Social. People will no longer be required to work from home, and travel restrictions on visitors from other Nordic countries will be relaxed. So there is something there that they are removing now. Kevin says smash the like button. Yes, that is the most important thing to do. Uh, Bambi says my body clock is in the US time after 2 years of lives. Is that credit to Dr. Bean? Titan says like there should be more like buttons. Yes. Uh, Rima says if there's a chance of long hauler, then is this wise? Maybe they know long hauler isn't as likely. Rima, uh, wise meaning opening up the society. It is possible that it is not as likely because of its milder impact. And Dr. Z is here. So, hey, Dr. Z, how are you? Because the brain and nervous system they are fascinating. I used to always top nervous system exams. Kevin says, what key changes are you looking for in the disease presentation and impact that would make you declare it's no longer a pandemic? Next strain will be half as bad as Omicron. So we're already seeing it with the BA2 saying. So, first, isn't this interesting that Omicron actually is the BA2 is actually not the right home for Omicron? The similarities are very few. So, it is a distant cousin, if at all. It could have been a different name altogether. And the BA2's behavior of not being able to escape immunity as BA1 does. Remember that there is a mutation in the spike protein which is missing in BA2 compared to BA1, and that mutation is the one that helps with the escaping from the neutralizing antibodies. So BA2 is slightly more transmissible, but slightly less escapable. To me, that sounds more, even milder. So to me, it seems like if this happens, that it is a mild cold, appears for youngsters, healthy individuals for 2 3 days and goes away. In my own case, you could actually hear today I was coughing as well. So it seems like 52 years of age, no comorbidities so far. It seems like in some people it just lingers on for some time. And in the past, there have been viruses whose cough will continue for some weeks or even month or after. So maybe it is that kind, but eventually it didn't do more damage. And of course, I can say I was vaccinated, double dose, and then uh, at least I was aware by exploring those things together for vitamins and other things. So I had been taking them. But if this becomes more of a norm, that if it can become comfortable that this is how it would behave, then I can tell you my symptoms were not even, they have persisted longer, but they were not even close to the common cold I used to get every year or every 2 years or 3 years. When I get common cold, I get knocked out. I have to be on the bed for 2 3 days and I have no idea where the world is going. It looks like Twilight Zone for me. And this was not the case. So for me, even if it is this way, but we can get some more data to see if it, what kind of damage and who is it causing damage in, then we can actually start saying that we are done. So Saraswati says, are you all better? So all good except this occasional cough that is still there. Other than that, nothing else. I do everything the way I used to, and there is nothing else at all. Our doc says, "Do you make dollar when you buy a T-shirt or other medical merchandise, or does that just go to YouTube?" No, I do make dollars. So I think, um, so let's say if there is something that is $20 or so, I will probably get 10, $15, $10. One day I was looking at it. It's not YouTube; it is Teespring, and I was thinking that lesser than half goes to us. But if YouTube's main uh, thing for us used to be the revenue from the ads. Nowadays, that have reduced, and there are many factors to that. Number one, generally, the viewership is reduced. If you look at the latest videos, you'll see that they do not watch that much. And secondly, um, pandemic is ending, so it's normal that the people's support is reducing as well. And then thirdly, I think YouTube algorithm doesn't really like me very much, and so the exposure is reduced as well. So the number of impressions that they used to make, and that has gone how down. uh, More than 50% of the channels um, stats have gone down. So meaning channel has gone down more than 50%. So still, I had never started with the concept of saying let's grow the channel. So that's okay, that's expected. So to answer your question, yes, I get a part of it. Rachel says, can we truly say we are past the pandemic if people will still be experiencing long COVID with no cure? What about long COVID patients who recovered? Should they be worried about reinfection? So, excuse me, the reinfection part is still to be seen because, for example, it is said that BA2 can reinfect BA1 infected people. So, let's say I was actually BA1. Now, am I open for BA2? Number one. Number two, what does that mean? Would it be BA2 infects me for a couple of days and then goes away, or would this be more severe? That is what we do not know yet. Technically, from a pandemic's technical point of view, when a disease is not carried from one community to another, then it is across the countries, and then it is not a pandemic. So I think we are still in pandemic because it can move around through the people from one country to the other, although it is now becoming endemic. Endemic is it's going to sustain within the society, maybe with an R naught of 1 or 1.1 or something like that, and just be there. And I think that we will all, the way it is going, that it is not leaving anyone alone. We will all be exposed, we will all develop the immunity to it. Some of us, unfortunately, will develop long COVID, some of us might even die as well. And then eventually it's going to be everywhere and we'll be out of it. This may be then a yearly, seasonal kind of a thing. Rima says, I hate man colds. My husband is worse with a man cold. Yes. So COVID didn't do much to me compared to the cold that I get. Cold just knocks me out. My family knows that now he's on the bed for 3 days and he's just going to sleep. Bambi says, can you sell on Amazon? I have never thought about that. I'll see if I can. The reason for the Teespring is this, that I just have to upload the design. They make the t-shirts, they order them, they ship them. So they do everything. I just have given the design. And then it makes sense that they take the majority of it because I just gave them the design. Who's whining? Scorpy says, well, one had it in December, whole class got it, and late January they all got it again. I'm so sorry. I hope they're okay. I think that there will be more variants. I think it is going to, this is the, it is so funny that I have been saying it for more than a year now. From I started talking about it, that this will continue to become friendlier and friendlier. And every time I say it, I get angry and upset notes. But we are seeing it to become friendly and friendly. So I think there'll be more variants, but they would continue to become friendlier to us. That's how it should be. People keep saying that, look, there is a very simple example of Wuhan variant and then Beta or then Delta that were not as friendly. But they keep dismissing the fact that the whole world was open for these guys. And so they didn't have a competition, they didn't have a challenge. Now the virus has a challenge. People are previously infected and recovered. There are other virus types that are wiping out the other viruses. They're fighting with each other. Then people are vaccinated as well. There are vitamin D's are better taken. There is so much challenge to the virus that it has to become better fit to live with us. And so when here is a scenario in which it can become worst and sustain, and that is it changes, for example, that neocov, one mutation change and done, and we have a new coronavirus pandemic with one third population dying. That is a very different kind of a virus, with the meaning it's still coronavirus, but the pathology and the implications are different. That's a MERS-CoV virus. If SARS-CoV-2 is replaced by MERS-CoV, that mutated one, in which I think that these guys should not mutate these things anymore. They should leave them alone. Or if this virus becomes so mutated that it's not COVID anymore, it's just an entirely different thing, then it would have the world open to it once more. And then, yeah, it can become bad too. But I think, unfortunately, those who were weaker, fragile, many of them died, unfortunately. Many have gotten the infection and recovered or became long COVID or had permanent damages. And then others have recovered, vaccinated, uh, more sharp in understanding how to manage it, and so on. So it will continue to it will continue to improve or become fit with us. Scorpio says, because I'm constantly exposed. What I'm seeing is that those who are more exposed are actually getting better. If you're a healthcare worker or such, they are developing better protection. I read a statistics that average age of death from COVID was 83. It sounds accurate, but there were youngsters too, but youngsters' deaths were less. Bugatti says we're all going to die. Yeah, that's not news. Laurie says, Luffy, you can read his eyes and know what he's thinking. Go away. Yes. I actually, so we we are trying that he wakes up during the day so he doesn't do this at night. Mary says, do you know if there have been reports of microclotting with Omicron as there was with all other variants? Anytime it becomes severe, one contributing factor is microclotting. It is still working with ACE2, so it would still be causing it. I think it is causing less, but it is still causing it. Joel has a very interesting one. So we had COVID for 8 days, positive tests, different brands, me negative, and children never had symptoms. 3 weeks now, waiting for my T cell results. Other tests, if you can just order any test, then I would love to see, or I would love your doctors to see the D dimers, the CRPs. If you can get auto antibodies to ACE2, that will be interesting. But generally, if you're feeling fine and you don't have any remnants, then you're fine. Random says, how would the vax labs profit if the pandemic is over? So they're making anti-cancer drugs, they're making vaccines for other things too. They've already started doing it. Kathy says, your artwork makes this understandable to me. Thank you very much. I sometimes think that I do this just to be able to draw. I like drawing. Lana says, I thought you said that it can't change that much beyond Omicron because of that study that showed AS2 was already extremely tight. And correct. And that is why the transmissibility is subtle. I keep looking at, is it 10 times more transmissible? They keep saying mildly more transmissible, subtly more transmissible, 10-20% more transmissible, which is sufficient for it to wipe out BA1, but is not, it's not gathering any more speed than how BA1 was doing. So the spread is similar. Scorpio says, love your artwork. Thank you very much. Yep, agreed. So is there a black seed that is bad? So I take Nigella sativa, uh, what is that? The oil. It's interesting to see cats have slit-shaped pupils and their ears have moved automatically to direction of sound. That's interesting. I read somewhere that cats have 32 muscles in their ears to ignore you. Janet says, is there a preferred black seed? So I can show you which one I take. I just take a on Amazon. See if I find it. So if I can quickly share my screen, I use this one, black seed oil. There may be others that are better, but I have this one. And again, no affiliation. If you buy it from Amazon, I won't get any commission. This is not an affiliate link. I just quickly Amazoned it to show it to you. So, so Radmila says how much? I actually take one tiny teaspoon every day. So Cal said, waiting for FDA approval for Novavax. I like Novavax, and I have done a bunch of videos about Novavax. So if you just say Dr. Bean Novavax, if you Google it or DuckDuckGo it, you can see them. I like it. The only thing I do not have yet is the latest data and the side effects data. I need to look into that. Rachel says the higher the TQ, the more effective the black seed oil will be. Biontel's brand can get up to 4%, but it's very expensive. Interesting. I did not know that part of the science. Thank you for sharing. Larna, Larna, this is just a silly question, but do you hang up your own artwork in your house? If so, what's your favorite piece that you have made? So, the only artwork I'm allowed to put in my house is this one. Otherwise, my artwork has no place in my home. And that is because I'll show it to you. So, this is the artwork. This was a watercolor I did a bunch of years ago. So that's the only one that is hanging in my studio. Otherwise, my artwork has it's not allowed. Okay, so let's see. Rima says, could you please see Jovid's question? Let's see. Jovid says, I was in an electroporation DNA vaccine trial. I hope one day you're able to talk about that technology. Okay, I will look it up. Michael says, do you think you and Luffy should go on Spotify? I think there would be lots of criticism if they deplatform you, but worldwide truck protest if deplatform Luffy. Sure, I can go there. Um, so Mary says, if you recover from COVID, does the microclotting stop there, or is it something that we need to continue to worry about? So in majority of the people who recover fully, it goes away. But in some people who start having the long COVID, one possible reason could be microclotting, and that could be occurring because of the autoimmune antibodies against the platelet factor 4 plus anti-ACE2 antibodies. Stanley says, are people recovering from long COVID? Yes. I have two family members and they are almost back to normal. Not fully, but almost. I would say 98, 99%. Random says, I'm on a vacation, recommend me a movie. That's a very difficult question. Um, I watch movies and I forget their names. So I can only think of the ones that I want to recommend without knowing the names. Um, so the one that I'm thinking. I'm so sorry. I do not remember actors' names. I do not remember movies' names. I don't remember movies after 3, 4 months. You can have me watch them again, and I'll watch them as if these were new. Sometimes I remember I watched this movie, and here's a scene that I remember. For example, we watched this Eternals a few days ago, and my wife knows I don't remember actors at all, but Angelina Jolie I remembered. So somehow I said, what was up with her hair? They looked so powdery and rough. And she said, how do you remember her name? I said, I don't know how, but sometimes I just remember these glimpses. Bambi Seeker says, I don't remember actors' names either. Me neither. Dr. Z has a question. Dr. Z, how did you know? So, yeah, so two things are going to happen in this month. Valentine's, and my birthday. So I have no idea. I will be here. We'll celebrate it together. But thank you very much for remembering and asking. So, can someone recommend a movie to random if I cannot remember it? John Doe says, I really like the forest one you did recently. And that is also true that my paintings have become a little better. Previously, I used to do on traditional media with oils, and I was in the beginning. So I don't think that they were much worth putting up. Now that I have become a little bit better, I don't do the physical medium paintings anymore. I do digital, so they don't go on the walls. I was actually going to have a TV in my room with my paintings on it. Random says, what about a book? So, one book that I really love is this one, Make Time. I love this book, Make Time, How to Focus on Matters Every Day. The basic idea they have for the book, Make Time, is that we waste so much time in things that are just consumption and we are not doing it. And then we just simply say, I don't have time to do this or I'm busy. But actually, we have filled our days with lots of less useful work. Or if I can add to this book, we have filled our days with consumption. We are consuming, but we're not acting to move forward. And so, I am to be blamed for that as well. I love this book. And I love Contagious as well. I love the Lean Startup too. So these are good books. And I have a lot of art books here. And I love this book, Thinker Toys. If Thinker Toys is so interesting. Let me just quickly see if I can show it to you on Amazon. Thinker Toys. This book, although it is $13, and you can't just read it like continuously. What it is that it has. I have that book over there. There. So it has various little thinking puzzles. So um, it's not riddles, but it is very interesting way of changing your perspective for thinking. So I love this book, Thinker Toys. Dr. Z says the four agreements, so great and simple. Got it. Chronic, absolutely chronic. Yes, I have read it. The Art of Hearing Heartbeats, an amazing soul moving book. Excellent. Thank you very much for these. Dana says, does aggressive early treatment prevent long COVID? I can say that for my patients, I have very rarely seen long COVID in them. And that is because many people who are around me, they start things very early on. I'm seeing the similar messages from many doctors too, but this is not a scientific study. This is an observation. Lodazal says, Pig with Nicolas Cage was fun. It may be R. Dr. Z says, what kind of movie? Comedy, action, drama. Penny says, Silent C. Gary says, keep painting dog. Good stuff. Thank you very much. Mary says, Walk the Line, most romantic movie for Valentine's Day. Excellent. So this is a good question. Giselle says, if we were ill back in late January, early February 2020, is it possible to know if it was COVID-19 experienced long haul fatigue? I do not know if the T cell T detect test goes that far back, but if you can look up for T detects test and ask them that what is their sensitivity, specificity, and how long back. Maybe there are others too. T cell knows if you had COVID. So, how far back? Knowing whether you had COVID-19 can help you first test to look T cell responses in SARS-CoV-2. So, you may have to contact them to ask them that how far back does it have a chance. So, T detect the cell. Mary says, please take good care of yourself. You're so kind. The world needs more people like you. Thank you very much. And you all take care of yourselves as well. Carolyn says, me before you was great. Cool. Rima, you watch comedy. I watch space travel type uh, programs or movies. Mary says, not really a question. I just wanted to say how much I appreciate you taking the time to answer my questions. I wish you lived in Lancaster. Want you to be my daughter. Thank you very much. And hopefully you stay safe, happy, and healthy. So, what about Dr. Bean writing a graphic novel about viral and bacterial mechanisms similar to Yuval Harari's History of the World? It should be done, Meeple Art. How is your NFT project going? Rima says your brain process is at a much higher level than mine. No, you are actually sharper than I am. Oh, so Anthony Hopkins, is that the Braveheart? I love Braveheart. If he's Anthony, no, that is not Anthony Hopkins. That was, who was that? Anthony Hopkins, isn't that the Silence of the Lambs? So this is how I know movies. I just hodgepodge them. This is why nobody talks with me about movies. I start doing this thing. Vincenzo says, finally able to catch you live. I was wondering, I'm unvaccinated. I've been around multiple positive cases. I keep testing negative. I also don't have antibodies. Weird. Why is that? Check your T cells. Do a T detect. And maybe your innate arm is good enough. Maybe you have cross immunity. So there are actually people who do not develop symptoms, have developed um, defense, and are fine. I actually did um, that studies discussion a few days ago. Yes, yes, Braveheart was Mel Gibson, but I loved Braveheart. So Heidi is as Dr. Bean is a Trekkie. So Heidi, I'm so bad at walking and trekking that you have to drag me to take you out for trekking. Rima, you making fun of me? Random is making fun of me too. Sheila says I'll buy one of Dr. Bean's books. Yes, I have to pay my bills, buy my book, which is not written yet. Cool. So, are you all ready for the weekend? So, Sheila says, did you watch Game of Thrones? No. So, I watched, what is that series about Scandinavian countries far back? See, I cannot even tell the names. This is a, what is that? It was a series, quite brutal and quite, full of old time practices. And since then, I said, I'm not going to watch any such series that is in old time and people are being tortured and killed. What was that series' name? It was such a beautiful, yes, yes, Vikings. And the thing is this, if I don't like it, I still complete it. So I don't leave it in the middle. I loved it, but it was just so brutal. So since then, anything that looks like that or feels like that, I stay away from it. Oh yes, yes, yes. So Trekkie, Star Trek. Yes, of course, Star Trek and all such space age things. Yes. Rima says we'll be here the whole night. Rima, you started it. You said let's do this talk. Yep. Sorry, Michelle. Yes, I am a Star Trek fan. Star Trek, and then there was another in which there used to be deep space stations and you would go there and there are various environments. I used to love that one too. Marianne says I'm a sci-fi buff as well. The only thing is I forget the, the names. Rima says you have to watch History of the World. Okay, maybe over this weekend. Yes, yes, Deep Space Nine. Yes, I love it. Star Wars, I love Star Wars as well. I love Star Trek as well. And Deep Space Nine too. Outlander, okay. I'll check it out. So, Dr. Z, I have actually watched Sons of Anarchy. Watched it. All of it. I keep protesting, but I keep watching. Then I don't sleep. Whenever there is a person killing another person in some brutal way, then I don't sleep for 2 days, but I watch it. So Lana says, I remember you said that the spike protein antibodies will continue to be created at low levels. It was in your medical book. Won't the antibodies be continuously produced like that? So the thing is this, the antibody spike proteins, if I can draw this and explain, the Jones network hypothesis you're talking about. So let's do this. Let's do a game of ping pong to understand what's the benefit of it. Let's say spike protein, I'm going to make it something that I can, let's say this is spike protein. This is the shape is what I'm interested in making. And let's say against this spike protein, and this is what binds to ACE2. So let's say that the ACE2 has a structure like this, so it can bind with it. I'm totally oversimplifying it. There is a concept of epitope, the sizes of epitope, the size of this. spike protein, and so on. But imagine we are here, spike protein, ACE. So from this little concept, let's agree on one thing, and that is the agreement without which we cannot actually prove the rest. The agreement is that ACE2 receptor will be stimulated, triggered, um, activated by anything that looks like this. That looks like this. We make it in black. That has a shape like this, and the shape, of course, that can bind chemically or electromagnetically here. Good. That is the agreement. For example, the angiotensin molecules, they have to look like this as well to be able to, they have to be looking like this as well to be able to bind with ACE2. Good. So we we agree on this much. Part B of the concept. When spike protein arrives in our body, let's say spike protein arrives in our body, of course it goes and attaches to this ACE2 and causes a lot of damage and problems, but then we make antibodies against it. Again, I'm making it more simple, so I have explained these in detail much before, so let's keep it simple today. The antibody that is going to be anti-spike protein will have to have a structure that can bind with the spike protein. Antibodies are structured like this, so let me just make two sides of it. Antibodies have two binding spots, right? So can I say that the antibody will, and this is a wrong statement, but I'm going to make that statement and explain where it is wrong. Can I say that the antibody is going to look like spike protein, ACE2, because spike protein is binding with it and spike protein binds with ACE2? Correct? Although the incorrect part in here is that spike protein is made up of hundreds of amino acids. ACE2 receptor needs hundreds of them to connect. An antibody is only 6, 7 amino acids. So you can't just say that antibody is like ACE2. But let's go with this line of thinking. Now what the body does is, body says, man, we are making a lot of these antibodies. We want them to go away. One way for these antibodies to go away is to remove the cells that are making it, right? So cause them to have apoptosis and die. That is one mechanism. And so this cell would die. This is a plasma cell. This is an active B cell that was making these um, antibodies. That's one mechanism. But we know that there are going to be a lot of memory cells that would go down, live around, and continue to make these antibodies. So let's say these B cells would say, you know what, we would just keep making more. We want to make more. Some of them would become memory cells, they would just sleep, some would be active, and they are making this. Now our body wants these antibodies to be cleared out very fast. It doesn't want these antibodies to hang around for long. So what it would do is it will create another or activate another B cell. This B cell, its job is to make antibodies against this antibody. So now think about it for a second. Here is the payoff, the punchline for the whole thing. The antibody that would come from here is going to have to look like a spike protein. Only then that will bind here. So let me make this antibody a green antibody. Antibodies have two parts, have two binding sites. So I'm just doing that. So let's say now this antibody has a binding region that would bind with this and this antibody to clear this out. And this is coming from this cell. Now we know that the problem is that this antibody has to be shaped like spike protein. And if it is that way, then it is going to attach with the ACE2 as well. And that is where the Jern's theory of network hypothesis, that there is Jern's hypothesis, network hypothesis, where it says that this can continue to cause an issue. But normally what happens is these two systems keep clearing each other. So this guy is going to produce some antibodies that are going to clear these out. Then these antibodies are going to clear these out. And slowly, in a few days to weeks, both systems would ramp down and things would clear out. So that is the normal mechanism. Good. The problem in this mechanism is that this antibody that is produced as a goodwill to clear this antibody has a binding site that can bind with the ACE2, and so this antibody can look like a spike protein to our body and cause issues. Now, to go to your question, I remember you said that the spike protein antibodies will continue to be created at low levels. Yes, it was in your medical book. Yes. Won't the antibodies be continuously produced like that as well? Yes. But the function of this structure is that they both would continue to reduce each other by eliminating and binding with each other. And then slowly these cells would start dying as well. And so the whole thing would go down. So let's say if these are really in tiny amounts, they would just bind with each other and clear each other out. So we'll go back to sort of zero. But that is where sometimes it doesn't happen, and we can end up with the long COVID. Or one pathology could be this. Yes, yes. So somebody said Saw was also scary. Yes, I actually watched Saw when I was younger, and it was just so brutal. Okay, 2 hours, guys. There are still questions. Uh, so this is actually a very good question. Kevi Revi says, does spike protein in Novavax spread in the bloodstream and cause havoc elsewhere like mRNA? First, and I get so much heat for saying this, mRNA vaccine, mRNA does not go out to ovaries and those things. It's the lipid nanoparticles pieces that go out. And I'll keep saying this, and haters are going to keep attacking me. But besides that, the Novavax, that is a good question because Novavax itself is a spike protein or bouquet of spike protein. So let's look at that for a second. So Novavax is a bunch of spike proteins that are stuck together in a structure where they say that the overall size of the structure is similar to the virus. So to our immune system, it almost looks like a virus, right? So this is how the this particle is. So it really is just a bouquet of spike proteins, and they're stuck together. Now, when they're given in the tissue, in theory, for these spikes to just run away in a blood vessel is going to be so difficult. Even a single spike, for that to go out in the blood vessel, is difficult. Here we have a bouquet. For this bouquet, for this set of spikes stuck together, for these to enter. So, Kevi Revi, you seem to be putting me on the spot so that people can start becoming upset with me. But we got to talk mechanisms and face the folks. All right, so here, this is a blood vessel. For this thing to enter in the blood vessel and then go other places, it has to be small enough to do that. One possibility is if it breaks down. So we'll talk about that in a second. The other possibility is that inflammation occurs in this area. Inflammatory, excuse me, cytokines and chemokines. Cytokines and chemokines, what they do is they cause vasodilatation, right? Plus, they shrink the endothelial cells, which causes these gaps between the cells to increase in size. Plus, it is possible that when the inflammation occurs, the vessel itself becomes damaged because of the war occurring and cytokines and the cells that are active and that are killing things. So it is possible, and this is possible with the other spikes as well. So it is not. So imagine now here we have a blood vessel. That poor blood vessel got broken up. So my so let's say this is a blood vessel here, and this blood vessel is broken up, so it has gotten those big gaps in it, and through those gaps things can enter and things can exit, correct? And there are those cells here as well. So now the question is, can this spike enter here? The first logical answer that it is going to be difficult for it to enter because it is actually stuck on this bouquet. Second, because it is not going to really just enter a blood vessel and go everywhere, it's going to be eaten up by whom? Macrophages, neutrophils, and the dendritic cells. Interestingly, this bouquet so this is a macrophage or a dendritic cell, and that is going to endocytose this or phagocytose this and eat it up. Interestingly, this bouquet from Novavax is not going to go into the normal cells because it is not wrapped in a lipid nanoparticle to go into the normal cell and then bring the mRNA there, then go to the ribosome and then produce the spike proteins inside the cell. That's not going to happen. This is what you have. This is all you got, whatever is the dose of the spike protein. And this dose is going to be eaten up by the immune system cells instead of the normal system cells. And immune system cells' function is to pick it up and break it down into smaller pieces and then present it onto the surface and activate the normal immune system. So, for this spike protein to actually escape is even more limited because normal cells are not going to make it. So then the question still becomes, could we have a few spikes? So if you said, pretty please, we need some spikes, we want them to go out, we want to then scare the whole world and say, you are in trouble. So could we have some spike pieces that can go in here? So the answer is very difficult that you can have them, but what is the what is the easiest, or not easiest, what is the probability? That probability is this macrophage ate it, broke it down into smaller pieces, then it presented it on its surface, and it will present that both on MHC2 and MHC1. Because it is a nucleated cell, it's going to produce it, put it on MHC1 as well. So when it puts it on MHC1 and presents it outside, this would cause cytotoxic T cells to kill this macrophage. This would also cause other immune system cells to attack this macrophage as well, which actually is a better outcome than messenger RNA vaccines, because there the attack is going to occur to the normal cells. Here the attack is occurring on the immune cells. They're used to doing these things. Their function is to work with the antibodies, and they'll be reproduced, and there'll be more of them. So that's not a problem. So now, and macrophages actually clear out each other by doing this kind of a thing. So imagine that this macrophage becomes attacked. When it becomes attacked and it breaks down, and it has half digested spike proteins in it, and those spill out, those spike proteins could go into the blood vessels because there's inflammation, they're dilated, and then there are pieces, and these are going to go. Excuse me. So, how many mechanisms you have to provide for this thing to eventually end up in the blood vessels? You have to, number one, make a blood vessel dilated enough to allow a spike protein to cross. And you can do your own reading about the capillaries and about the arterioles and venules to understand how difficult it is for proteins to cross them, because these gaps actually have a basement membrane around them. So, around even a capillary, there is a fine net around it, which kind of keeps it filtering system instead of just freely moving in and out system. So there's a net outside. So if I can do this, so it is a capillary, it does have gaps in it through which fluids and oxygen can go out and nutrition can go out and nutrition can come in. But it is not that a protein inside here, for example albumin, can simply get out. If that happens, we'll die. Similarly, it is not easy for anything from outside to just simply come in. If that starts happening, our trash from the cells, the tissues, the garbage would just start entering the blood vessels. It will kill us. It normally goes through the lymph system into the lymph, and lymph would eventually go into the blood. But lymph cannot get into the blood without going through a lymph node. And lymph node is not going to let the trash just flow into the blood. There are follicular dendritic cells, there are monocytes, there are dendritic cells, there are other dendritic cells, there are macrophages. They're going to eat up all that trash. There's an army sitting in the lymph nodes. So you have to provide a lot of flexibility to the system to allow for the spikes to become freed from this bouquet. And for that, you have to get them eaten up and then break the cell, then have them get into the blood vessel. You have to make the blood vessel damaged. You have to remove the net. You have to tear the net, the basement membrane. You have to open up the blood vessel. You have to dilate it or damage it, and then the spike protein would go there. Then, once that spike protein is in the blood vessel, what you going to do with that? It's not in a very large quantity. It's tumbling around. So what? What would happen is, most of the time it is going to be eaten up. Do you know what is going to happen to the spike protein if it goes in the blood vessel? All blood, and these are the things that you can simply read And all blood passes through spleen, right? So blood goes in the spleen and blood comes out of the spleen. Spleen has structures which we say sinusites. So when I discuss these things, it seems like it's my medical exams. So spleens have sinusites. With the sinusites are sitting macrophages. They're like guards, and they're sitting there and they're saying, okay, are you going to come here? I'm watching you. This is a pretty. The eyes are not the best for this macrophage, but he's standing there. And when the things that flow into the spleen, they have to pass through these sinusites, they can get stuck here. When they get stuck, so let's say there is a spike protein happily running around and it gets stuck here in this filtration system. The macrophage is going to eat it up and clear it and clean that thing out of the system. So, just getting in the blood is also not going to be the sufficient thing for it. Now, let's answer this question as well, which you know that you are you're setting me up to have folks be upset. But let's talk about this as well. That will this be possible that this spike that has reached this blood vessel, let's make a spike in here, will this spike get out of this blood vessel now or blood system and go to, let's say, ovary? Now the spike was able to enter here in the blood vessel. We did so many provisions for it. We created local inflammation. We broke some of the basement membrane. We dilated the blood vessel. We damaged the blood vessel. We freed up the spike protein, and then we said go in. And somehow we said it should not go to the lymph. It should just go directly in the blood. This is like don't pass, go jail, directly go to the go whatever, that monopoly thing. This spike protein, if we want it now to get out and go and do something, then the ovaries blood vessel is not damaged. That doesn't have any local inflammation, and spike is running around in the blood. That is not going to cause, it's not going to stop somewhere to say, let me create some inflammation here. And I would only, so imagine the blood cardiovascular system being a huge sea with turbulent fluids in it and having millions of branches. And we are saying, you know what, this would just be when the spike reaches here, then somehow this blood vessel will be open here and allow the spike to just conveniently get out and go to the ovary. That's not going to happen. And if that is going to happen, then why ovary? Why not somewhere else? Number one. Number two, spike would actually not have a chance to get out because it's going to be cleared out. So there are so many problems with the folks who make up these mechanisms and make up just words that this what would happen. But good question. Um, I hope that the answer makes it clear. 2 hour 23 minutes, and we still have questions. Laurie says, you read studies so many hours and you draw. When do you have time to read and watch movies? So, tomorrow and today. So, after this talk, I will go and, although my family is sleeping, but I'll go and say, yay, off. And then I will put up some movie or something and I'll start watching. So, Vinod has a good question, and that is that do I have any concrete studies for the, so I saw a couple of studies a few days ago which were pointing at some genetic factors that can help understand who are getting severe COVID. I haven't read them yet. Somebody forwarded these to me, so I'll look at them. Lori says you need pictures in your book. Yes, absolutely. If there's a book, then it's going to be pictures. All right. So with this, absolutely listen to Ratmila and don't forget the like button. And finally, if you like this kind of a work and if you would like to support it, like, subscribe, and share. And if you would like to support it further, then there are links in the description. You can buy me a coffee, or you can use PayPal, or you can be a patron. Thank you very much. Have a nice weekend. Either I'll see you on the weekend if I thought that pandemic is over and we need to have Paul with us and discuss it, or I'll see you over the on Monday. Sita says, Dr. Bean is a night owl. Yes. So now I'm gonna the enjoyment starts. Actually, I enjoy this time as well. Look, 2 hour 25 minutes, and I had done a lecture before that, and here I've been just verbatim speaking, and I am still full of energy. So that is because we are talking. So excellent. Thank you very much. See you tomorrow or Monday.